Hello.
Hello. It's so fun to see all of the names coming in. Oh, this is wonderful. Well, welcome everyone. I think we are about ready to begin. We'd love to start just right on time. Cannot wait to share our content with you today. Oh, so wonderful to see these names popping up on my screen. I'm going to try to not be distracted. It's making me so happy. If we haven't yet met, I'm Cara Hertz, Executive Director of Alumni Relations, and welcome to our first ever Gonzaga Leadership Summit session. Before we entered this COVID landscape, we were envisioning a plan to bring all of you, our incredible volunteer leaders and ambassadors of Gonzaga across all campus areas together. And the vision was to be on campus. And we'd spend a couple of days engaging in leadership development, learning and advising on the most urgent priorities of our university, and getting to know one another as a true Gonzaga leadership network. And as we were imagining this, we couldn't fully comprehend then just how important and timely this vision would be. Now we are moving through a very critical time for our university. It's a time where your leadership is of great importance to us. Today, we have 132 RSVPs for our session, and we are so grateful and encouraged to have you all here. So while we're not together on campus, that goal still remains, and we hope you'll still find great value in our virtual monthly Leadership Summit sessions together. So today, all of you who are still coming in, and it's wonderful to see your names, you represent our most important ambassadors, volunteer leaders, board members, our mentors, our top employers, our donors of great impact, and we also want to extend a very warm welcome today to some of our current Gonzaga parents that are joining us. And they will, of course, bring a very important perspective to our conversations. And we just can't wait for you all to get to meet each other. So the format for today's 1-hour session will be a 20-minute keynote presentation, followed by breakout conversations for about 25 minutes. There will be a facilitator in each of your breakout rooms to lead the dialogue and take notes that will be shared back with us. And a big thank you to all of our facilitators today. And just a reminder that we are recording this session for those that can't be with us in person, but we will not be recording the breakout room discussions. And also, if it's easier, you can minimize the boxes on your screen by clicking the speaker view in your right-hand corner. There's an icon that says view, and that might make it a little bit easier to focus on the presentation. But now it's my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker for our session today, kicking off our programming so appropriately as we reflect on the distinctiveness of our Jesuit education with 5 practices of Jesuit leadership. Dr. Michelle Wheatley is our Vice President for Mission and Ministry. She has served at Gonzaga for the past 13 years in a succession of roles with the Mission and Ministry offices, and she currently serves on several boards in the Diocese of Spokane. She brings a wealth of knowledge in the areas of Jesuit mission leadership and organizational development. So welcome, Michelle, and thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much, Cara, and greetings to all of you. I'm so pleased to be with you, and I've been looking forward to this time today. I'm going to take a moment and share my screen with you. So as Cara mentioned, my goal for today is to share with you some insights from the traditions that shape Gonzaga's identity and mission. And my hope is that this will be a time for a bit of refreshment and reflection, an opportunity to make connections with other members of our ZAG family, to draw some inspiration for your life and or your work, and to hear a bit about how it is that our university is carrying forward our mission today. These are the 5 practices that are going to guide the reflections that I share with you over the next 20 minutes or so. And you'll notice they look pretty accessible and straightforward, maybe even a little bit generic, although not necessarily easy. And what I'm hoping to do with each of these is share a few insights about how that practice finds some meaning within our mission traditions, and then say something about how I see Gonzaga embodying that practice right now. I'll also offer you a question to be considering during that segment, and I'm hoping that this will help set the stage for a really meaningful small group conversation. Before we dive in, I do want to take a moment to review some key terms with you. Gonzaga is a Jesuit Catholic and humanistic university. The Jesuits are more formally known as the Society of Jesus, a religious order within the Catholic Church, founded in a context of Renaissance humanism. The Society of Jesus is the largest male religious order in the Catholic Church, known probably especially for missionary work and education. This religious order is made up today of almost 17,000 priests and brothers throughout the world, working in almost every profession that you can think of, but united together in their unofficial motto, which you see here on the screen, for the greater glory of God. The Jesuits were founded by St. Ignatius of Loyola in the 1500s, and then our particular namesake, St. Aloysius Gonzaga, lived a little bit later in the 1500s, and he's a heroic example of our mission in action. He was a Jesuit saint who sacrificed his life at the young age of 23, ministering to plague victims in Rome, and he's now commonly referred to as a patron saint for youth and for Jesuit students. I will be using spiritual and religious language in my comments to you today, and I'm mindful that we come together from a variety of different perspectives and backgrounds, and also with different levels of familiarity about Gonzaga's mission. So I've tried to put some things together today that hopefully make it easier to find some points of connection with your own experience, but we will also be following up with some resources for deeper learning and to engage some of the questions that you might have or might arise today. So with that context, let's dive in. Our first practice for today is start with why. And the question for you to ponder is, how do you understand the purpose of your life, or your life and your work? Some of you may be familiar with the image on the screen. It comes from Simon Sinek, an ethnographer with a pretty famous TED Talk, who offers this simple but powerful model for inspirational leadership that he calls the golden circle. What he claims is that great leaders and great institutions always start with why. They understand why their cause or their organization exists, and it's this why that provides the inspiration and the grounding for what they do and how they do it. Now, St. Ignatius would not have known about this golden circle, but he seemed to intuit that having a clearly defined goal would help channel energy effectively. So a few examples. Ignatius named the Jesuits the Society of Jesus, not the Society of Ignatius. Not because Jesuits are the only Catholics or Christians who love Jesus, but because he wanted their purpose to be right here, for his men to always keep their focus on their ultimate commitment to be a part of Jesus's continuing mission in the world. One of the key legacies of St. Ignatius and the Jesuits are the spiritual exercises, which is less like a book and more like a manual, and it's one of the most influential guides to the spiritual life ever created. Ignatius was really intentional in beginning those exercises with a purpose statement, that they are to help lead a person towards spiritual freedom, or radical availability for their life's authentic purpose. He carried that intentionality through the exercises. At the beginning of each particular contemplation or meditation, Ignatius would name a purpose and invite the participant to identify what is it that you are seeking in these exercises. Generations of Jesuits have worked to sustain that same level of intentionality. The beginning of the constitutions, which set up the structures of the institution of the Society of Jesus, identify that the purpose of that work is to provide supporting walls, the bonds to fasten and weld the entire mission body together. At the beginning of the Ratio Studiorum, the original plan for Jesuit education, is a named goal to help students grow in knowledge and love of their maker. So there's always a purpose. For us at Gonzaga today, having a clear sense of our purpose is essential, and especially during tougher times and during adversity. Members of our community will observe that Gonzaga is a place that really seeks to keep our mission front and center. At the heart of that mission is our students. We are here for them, to educate them, mind, body, and spirit, so that they can leave here, to use Jesuit language, as people of competence, conscience, and compassion, people for others, fires who will kindle other fires. So again, the key question for your consideration in this section is, how do you understand the why of your life and your work? The next practice is remain flexible. And the question I invite you to consider here is, how open are you to different ways of achieving your purpose? One could assume that with such clearly defined aspirations that Ignatius would show little flexibility in the path toward reaching them. This was not so. One of Ignatius's companions even wrote about him, "Our father was a man of remarkable prudence and modesty. He realized that customs differed around the world, that not all things were right for all places." In the beginning of the spiritual exercises, Ignatius actually cautions against any disordered attachment to one particular gift of creation, acknowledging that various realities, and he names things like health or sickness, wealth or poverty, success or failure, each have the potential of leading us toward our ultimate purpose and values. The Jesuits, in fact, never would have come into being, and certainly not as we know them today, if Ignatius and his first companions had not been open and flexible. A couple examples. This image depicts a key moment in the life of Ignatius and his original companions. Becoming a religious order was not their first choice. They wanted to go to the Holy Land for ministry and service, but this was not possible, and this left Ignatius confused and frustrated. He brought that frustration to prayer and received a sort of mystical vision, depicted here by the artist, at a roadside chapel outside of Rome. And he seemed to hear Jesus say to him, "I will be favorable to you in Rome." So Ignatius and his friends went to offer their services to the Pope. And it was actually the Pope who challenged them, asking, "Why can't you make Rome your Jerusalem?" In other words, do you have a deep enough sense of who you are and why you are, that no matter the circumstances, you can fulfill your identity and your purpose? So the Jesuits came into being through openness to maintaining their purpose in the face of adversity and the unexpected. This came up again with education. The Jesuits did not intend to get into the business of education. It was actually through a process of discernment and reflection on their purpose that they determined that education was a powerful way for them to live out their mission, especially by producing graduates who would go on to be, and this is to use a word from Ignatius, to be leaven for the world. And of course, it's much harder for us now to imagine the world without Jesuit education. The first Jesuit school was founded in 1548, and by 1773, that number had grown to about 800, the largest international network of institutions operating under the same sponsorship that the world had ever seen. Today, there are more than 3,700 Jesuit schools throughout the world, counting millions of students, faculty, and staff. People will refer to the world we live in now as a VUCA world, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And perhaps we've never experienced that as fully as we have this year. For Gonzaga to navigate through today's world and help our students to do so, we have to be clear on our purpose and also very open to different ways of bringing that mission to life. Perhaps there's no better example than what we have been challenged and invited to do in the face of this pandemic this year, in the many dynamics of 2020, which is to keep our purpose right out in front as we lean into new ways of adapting and continuing our educational mission in the midst of these times. So again, the question for you is, how open are you to different ways of accomplishing your purpose? Our third practice, look for the best. And the question for your consideration is, where have you found God, or where have you found goodness in the midst of this really extraordinary year? Chris Lowney, in his work on Jesuit leadership, identified Jesuit ingenuity as an essential ingredient in the initial worldwide growth and success of the society. In his view, this ingenuity was cultivated by forming Jesuits in the demeanor, the attitudes, and the worldview that make adaptability and creativity possible. Specifically, Lowney named two ingredients. The first was indifference, and the second was a vision of divine love. Indifference means that Jesuits are free from those prejudices, attachments, fears, and narrow-mindedness that may prevent them from considering new and innovative possibilities for responding to God's call. The vision of divine love seeks for God in all places and enables Jesuits to be at home in the world, laboring for God's kingdom anywhere, even in unexpected places. From their founding, Jesuits hoped to live as contemplatives in action, and they called the world their monastery. This worldview is often described as sacramental, or as seeking deep attentiveness to God's presence in the concrete realities of our world. Many will describe the Jesuit spiritual tradition as finding or seeking for God in all things, because Jesuits believe that the whole world, including all of our human senses and capacities, can reveal the sacred. This is an incredibly world-affirming approach. This conviction that by entering more deeply into the mysteries of the universe, we enter more deeply into the mysteries of the divine. This conviction that nature mediates grace has propelled Jesuits and their partners into deeper study of the world. The first Jesuit schools included all disciplines, apart from medicine and law. In fact, engagement with secular sciences became a hallmark of the Jesuits, so much so that missionaries began identifying as having a cultural as well as a religious calling. You may know that Jesuits discovered quinine, invented the trapdoor, located the source of the Blue Nile, championed Baroque architecture, and became the namesakes of 35 craters on the moon. They situated themselves in the intersections between faith and culture, science and religion. They approached education in a way that, consistent with the broader Catholic intellectual tradition, seeks to integrate disciplines by relating everything to the meaning of human life in relationship to the transcendent. This is the tradition that continues at Gonzaga today. Because Jesuits believe that God or the sacred can be searched for in all things, then all places where learning happens, both inside and outside of the classroom, has the potential of leading a student more deeply into the mystery of truth and therefore into the mystery of the divine. Drawing from our humanistic tradition, we seek to provide for our students both skills-based training as well as holistic engagement with the arts and humanities and other support sources that are supposed to enlarge their understanding of what it means to be human and what it means to live a good and meaningful life in this world. We seek to look for what is good in one another, in communities, in systems, and build from there, responding in gratitude as much as possible. So again, the question for you, how have you experienced God, or how have you experienced goodness in the midst of this year? The fourth practice is lead and serve for the common good, which is an expression I'm borrowing from Gonzaga's mission statement. And the question for your consideration in this section is, how do you measure success? And you can interpret that question however you would like, in a day, in your work, in your life. I mentioned that Jesuit spirituality seeks to discover the sacred, or to find God in all things. Well, what do Jesuits believe that God is doing in all things? The Jesuit image of God is of one who labors for the continual creation and restoration and renewal of the world, to bring light to darkness, to lift up the lowly, to bring hope. In the 1970s, the Jesuits formally discerned that this overriding purpose of the Society of Jesus, the service of faith, must also include the promotion of justice. You may have heard some of these key Jesuit messages from some of big 20th century Jesuit leaders, especially Fathers Arupe and Kolvenbach. That love of God that doesn't show itself in love of neighbor is a farce. That in Jesuit education, we are seeking to graduate persons for others. That the real measure of our universities lies in who our students become. And that we learn not just through concepts, but through contact. This is why the many opportunities we have at Gonzaga for community engaged learning inside and outside of coursework is so crucial to our identity. Furthermore, our current leader of the Jesuits worldwide, Father Arturo Sosa, has specifically called on our Jesuit universities to be really engaged with our contexts, to do the tough intellectual work, the scholarly work and the creative inquiry into the most complex issues facing our human family and our world, to deeply analyze structures of injustice, and to propose solutions. So success for a Jesuit institution has to include positive social transformation. And again, the question for your consideration is, how do you measure success? Our last practice for today, imagine the possible. Here I'm drawing on language from Gonzaga's undergraduate core curriculum. And the question for your consideration here is, what gives you hope? Ignatius sustained a devastating injury in battle that prompted his conversion. And to those watching the battle, they would have perceived that the French defeated the Spanish. But what they probably would not have been able to perceive is that in the midst of this mess, one man's life was changing and setting him on a course that would change the world. We live in a time with a lot of big challenges, tensions, and dilemmas. Something that a former Father General of the Society of Jesus, Nicolas, said was that some of the dilemmas we face are absolutely genuine. But he also said, some of the things we face are not actually dilemmas. We just don't want to think creatively or we give up. Our tradition is ultimately one of hope. Everything we've been discussing and pondering today is that we have this tremendous opportunity here at Gonzaga to accompany our students, informative and transformative education, and to be a project of social transformation. It takes all of us working together to support this mission. And this is something we've been talking about within the university, is how each of us as individuals and as communities and networks can share in the responsibility of mission leadership. This will look different in different ways and places. Learning more about our mission through opportunities like this, and then discerning together what are creative ways that we can be contributing. This is an ongoing process and one that we invite you into along with us. What I would share with you in closing is that discernment is the signature Jesuit way of proceeding. And it's our primary inheritance as people who are moving this mission forward today. Most simply in the Christian tradition, discernment is about hearing and responding to God's word. In practice, and according to the Jesuit way, it involves deep attentiveness to the realities of the world around us, but also within us, thoughtful sense-making through the head and through the heart, and in a context of prayer, relationship, taking into consideration our human family's collective wisdom. And that it always has to result in loving action, in collaboration with the Spirit to bring about God's dreams for us and for the world. It's an adaptive, creative process, and this world needs adaptive, creative people. This world needs Jesuit education, this world needs our students, this world needs us, and this world needs you. So with that, I want to thank you so much for joining here together. I hope you have really good conversation in your small groups, and as you stay tuned, Lucas is actually going to send you forth into breakout rooms. Thank you.
Are we all back? We're all back. Oh, we've all been teleported back. Well, we sure hope you found your dialogue really valuable. Michelle, thank you so much for being with us and framing up those great conversations. We really hope at the most basic level that you have found this as a refresher and really a reconnection to who we are as a Gonzaga family, that our foundation, really our heart and soul, and the distinctiveness of who we are, especially in our leadership, is much because of our Jesuit identity. And so we hope that this session will be a nice way to start, and we can take it with us as we move forward and tie back to it in subsequent sessions as well. So just know that this is new to all of us. We're so excited that we had such a great turnout, but we will be sending a recap email. It will have the recording, and it will also have a survey. And we really would love your feedback on how we can make the following sessions even more valuable to you. So what you really liked and what you want more of would be really helpful. And we apologize. We did hear that some of you were teleported in and out of rooms a couple times. Sorry for the couple trips there, but we hope you got to meet a lot of new people. And speaking of meeting each other and meeting new leaders across, all of the country really joining us today, next month, our October session will be all about that. You could register now, and the follow-up email will have the registration. The title is Giving Back Through Virtual Mentoring and Networking. And we'll spend time networking with each other. So you'll be in several breakout rooms meeting each other. But you'll also get to hear about some innovation we've had recently in our mentoring and career area. So Aaron Shields and Ray Engel will join us for that session. And in November, I have to keep you in suspense. We have competing topics that we haven't quite landed on yet, but in December, Dr. McCullough will be joining us for our monthly session. And I think that's about it. We sure want to keep you out of here on time. Looks like we're going to. So please don't hesitate to give us any feedback. There's some upcoming events on the screen right now that might be somewhat fun. We're kicking off a Zegtoberfest series, just kind of a lighthearted and fun celebration through October and into November. And we hope you'll join us. But please send us any feedback and just take good care, stay healthy, have a great day, and go Zags. Thanks for being